For years, North Korea's army looked like a bit of a joke. Grainy footage of marching troops in outdated uniforms, tanks older than their crew, rifles that hadn't changed since the Cold War. The world saw a relic and stopped taking it seriously. And that was a bit of a mistake, because in the last decade, everything has changed. The gear is newer, the missiles are faster, the tactics are smarter, and beneath the parades and the propaganda, the Korean People's Army might just be turning into something far more capable and far more dangerous than anyone expected. So what exactly has been going on above the DMZ? Well, don't go anywhere, because we're about to tell you, as best we can. It's North Korea, the Hermit Kingdom. North Korea's military shortcomings were once glaring. After the Korean War, Pyongyang had relied heavily on Soviet and Chinese hand-me-downs and their own local adaptations thereof to equip itself. For a short time, this arrangement made sense, ensuring that the DPRK had access to serious hardware. By the 1990s, however, things were somewhat less rosy. For one, the Soviet Union had collapsed, leaving a Russia that, while still cordial with Pyongyang, it wasn't exactly linking arms and skipping gaily through the meadows like it once had. And it was a similar situation with China too, as while Beijing was still flying the hammer and sickle and doing the whole communist shtick, the rise of Deng Xiaoping and his socialism with Chinese characteristics, way of doing things, meant that now the two nations were no longer blood brothers in the great proletarian struggle as they had been in Mao's day. Rather, they were nations aligned by convenience, i.e. being opposed to US global hegemony. As a result, there was military cooperation still, but just not nearly to the extent of what it had once been, and frankly, you could tell easily. Just before we continue, quick word from our sponsor. Look, have you ever revisited something from your past and it turns out that it's actually better? Like the Resident Evil 2 remake, or when they brought back vinyl and that actually somehow worked. Well, Raycon just pulled that off with their Everyday Earbuds Classic. They've brought back the fan favorite model, but now it comes with active noise cancellation, which means that you can finally block out the world while still pretending to pay attention. Ah, my life. You also get 8 hours of playtime, a 32-hour battery, and 3 sound modes depending on how picky your ears are. I've been using them, and they're just a fantastic pair of Oh, hello. It's connecting to my phone. I'll take that out or it's going to start playing. And they're just a fantastic pair of earbuds. They're comfortable, they stay in, they don't look like a tiny flashlight sticking out of your head. They're just really nice. Actually, this isn't even on the talking points, but I just got this in the mail. Oh no, it's for it. This is not for the classics. They sent me this, but it's for the other one that I have. But you could put your Raycons in nice cases. I was going to demonstrate this live, and I've got this one that my daughter would absolutely love, but I'm confident enough to have a flowery case. All you need to do is go to buyraycon.com/warfronts, and you'll get 20% off the fan favorite Everyday Earbuds Classic. There's also a link in the description below. Go check them out. And now back to today's video. By the mid-90s, much of North Korea's military hardware was just simply obsolete. Many KPA armored units, for example, were stuck fielding local derivatives of the 1960s vintage T-62 tank, very much in their original, not upgraded form. You could also see it in individual gear too, as back in those days, the steel M40 helmet, so called because it is a copy of the Soviet M40, and we don't actually know its real service designation, remained the go-to, while the standard worldwide had become ballistic nylon lids, things like the MK6 with the Brits and the Gefechtsturm M92 with the Germans, things like that. Similarly for modern body armor and night vision, which were just not really a thing in the KPA at all. Then there's the matter of the economy. It had taken a big hit thanks to the collapse of global communism in the late 80s and early 90s, which had destroyed the trading bloc within which North Korea existed. And if that situation couldn't have been any worse, the nation was also hit by a cataclysmic famine a few years later, the Arduous March, as it's remembered in North Korea. We don't have reliable numbers for how many people died during this period, but we do know beyond all doubt that it was really, really bad, with the North Koreans not even trying to deny this. Needless to say, while obviously a great human tragedy, the Arduous March also decimated the economy and made military modernization all but impossible at the time. Thus was the situation in the noughties, with Pyongyang, then under the leadership of Kim Jong-il, desperately trying to patch everything in the nation back together, the military included. It was also around this time that we got those infamous pictures with which you're all already familiar. You know, the ones, this one, this one, this one, just to give you a few examples. And sure, objectively, they're outlandish, and let's be frank, they to inspire a chuckle or two, but the situation then didn't allow for anything better. The thing is, the noughties were a long time ago now, and as much as many of us still consider North Korea in those terms, we really shouldn't, because as we see it, it is a very, very different nation now, and it all comes down to Kim Jong-un, the man who inherited a bandaged-together military, and indeed a bandaged-together nation, and set about trying to get it properly healed. Well, healed in the sense of militarily functional rather than, in the sense of a nice place for people to actually live and function. So, with that said, let's move on and start having a look at his changes, shall we? Kim Jong-il's way of doing things was his so-called Songun politics. First announced in 1995 while conducting a field inspection of the KPA infantry, he described it as being, quote, a revolutionary idea of attaching great importance to the army and a politics emphasizing the perfect unity and the single-hearted unity of the party, army, and the people, and the role of the army as the vanguard. In other words, everything was to be about the military. Every cog in the nation's machinery, both literal and figurative, should be turning with the goal of advancing its capabilities in one form or another. There are whole books just about Songun politics, but for our purposes today, here's a really short TLDR. The military takes over the administration of huge swaths of the state, and everyone becomes a reservist, thus swelling the military while still making sure that the wider nation functions as needed. Thanks to the enormous stock of Cold War gear North Korea was sat on, Pyongyang was able to sustain that huge military during the bad times. But while Kim Jong-un liked the basic idea, after all, why wouldn't he want his nation to be as tooled up as possible, he recognized the fact that raw numbers only got someone so far in a war. The reality was that they needed to bring the KPA into the 21st century and acquire some much better kit. And for that, he needed money, or rather because planned economics and expansion of national output. Again, we're giving you a TLDR here, but the key idea he implemented was the Socialist Enterprise Responsibility Management System, or SERMS for short. To quote the man himself as he handily explained what SERMS was to a Workers' Party plenum in March 2013, we should research and perfect economic management methods of our style in line with the demands of reality's development. Economic management methods of our style that materialize the Jewish idea should be socialist enterprise management methods that ensure the producer masses fulfill their roles and responsibilities as masters of production and management. This should be done by firmly adhering to the socialist ownership of the means of production, and with all enterprises carrying out their business activities independently and creatively under the state's unified guidance. End quote. Or to put it more simply, turns out the guys and gals on the shop floor actually know what they're capable of far better than any bureaucrat, so let's just trust them and let them loose to do more making guns. It was more of quite literally anything, though. Any state enterprise that felt it could expand production in any way was given an automatic green light to get on it. As a real-life example, the writer of today's episode actually went to the DMZ and found Air Koryo-branded cigarettes for sale. And you might be wondering, well, why was an airline producing cigarettes? And well, that doesn't matter. It was something that wasn't being produced before, and now was. Extrapolate just that out across the whole economy, and you start to get an idea of how SERMS helped the economy to pick up. Of course, we know for a fact that this effort was not without its issues. Just check out the following extract spoken by Kim Jong-un at the 8th Party Congress in January 2021, quote, "The 5-year economic development strategy period wrapped up last year, but the results in most areas fell extremely short of our goals. The goals we set out were not met in almost all sectors, and numerous deviations and shortcomings were revealed. This is a serious lesson we must not overlook. We must thoroughly analyze the causes and take decisive measures to rectify them. The party is determined to launch a new 5-year plan for national economic development, focusing on realistic and scientific targets, and to mobilize all efforts to achieve them." So some key words there. Goals were set and were not met, and fell extremely short. Now, this is not the language of a man who is explaining abject failure. No, it is the language of a man for whom the progress that has been seen has been disappointing. Of course, whether or not we believe it is a whole other matter, but as you no doubt ascertained from the framing of this video, we think things are getting better, but there's still much work to be done. Summary of recent progress in North Korea is actually likely pretty accurate. And so, with that, we are all set on wider context, and that means that we can now get into the real meat of this video. The stuff, all of the new gear that they've been getting, and how the economy appears to be relatively on the up. And make no mistake, this isn't your dad's DPRK. Some of the stuff the Hermit Kingdom is now rocking is actually some pretty serious kit. At a 2020 military parade in Pyongyang, spectators saw what one South Korean general called literally a new look for the KPA in almost every way. There were shiny new tanks rolling by, colossal rocket launchers, troops in modern combat gear, even drones overhead. Of course, the legitimacy and quality of it all was, and indeed still is, hotly debated. But one thing was unmistakable. Whatever the reality of the matter, it was now a very different KPA that we were seeing. And nowhere was that more obvious than in the shiny new tank. Dubbed the M2020 by Western observers, despite its real name being a Cheonma-2, the new tank is, well, different, if nothing else. A longer chassis than previous North Korean tanks, 7 road wheels aside, an angular turret with big T-14 Armata and Abrams energy about it, and bristling with gadgets including everything from cage armor over the engine compartment to what appears to be the sensors and tubes needed for an active protection system. North Korean media was naturally all over this, hailing it as a game changer, with Kim Jong-un himself even taking one for an in-front-of-the-camera drive in early 2024, after which he praised its striking power and maneuverability and called it the most powerful tank in the world. At the same event, he also expressed great satisfaction seeing his new armor perform in a mock battle. The message was clear. After decades of relying on outdated Soviet hand-me-downs, the DPRK had built a tank it wants the world, and its own people, to believe can go toe-to-toe with the very best. But can it really? Well, long story short here, we have absolutely no idea, and anyone who tells you that they do is probably lying. The reality is that we just don't have enough information about this tank to give a solid answer. So, having said that, what realistic inferences and what educated guesstimates have been made from the information that we do have? Well, there's certainly no shortage of pessimistic takes. Many Western pundits point out that despite North Korea having a long history of domestic tank production, the new tank, the Cheonma-2, simply cannot be a world leader. As an example, both Joseph Trevor Thick and Tyler Ogaway, writing for the Warzone back when it was first unveiled, said that, quoting them here, "Unlike the T-14 Armata, for example, this North Korean tank still has a manned turret and wouldn't feature the Russian vehicle's complex remote vision system for its crew of 3 who all sit together in the front hull." They also stressed that, quoting again, "In addition, just having angular lines akin to those on the American tank also does not mean the North Korean one has anywhere near the same kind of complex composite passive armor, which includes layers of ceramics and depleted uranium either." And as a further note, they point out, and we'll quote them again, "Since the side skirts obscure the road wheels, it's not possible to tell for sure, but it seems very plausible that the underlying chassis over this new North Korean tank still owes much to the old Soviet designs as well. The Pokpang Ho and subsequent Songan Ho both use an extended version of the chassis of the previous Chonma Ho, which itself was derived from the Soviet T-62. It's not hard to believe that the North Koreans built on that proven design, with which they now have great experience in developing this latest tank, rather than starting entirely from scratch." End quote. Not that that last point is necessarily a bad thing if you want arty sense. Don't forget that the Chinese Type 99 is based on the chassis of a T-72, and you don't exactly find people writing it off as a comedy mock tank. Instead, it's all about how it's been built from that start point. It'll either be a cost-effective bottom-up rebuild or a total botch job designed to only threaten the cameras. But whereas we know that the Type 99 is a tidy little bit of kit, again, when it comes to the Cheonma-2, we ultimately just can't say for certain. Still, even skeptics concede that seeing new North Korean tanks in any form is significant. The KPA hadn't introduced a fresh tank design in decades. Even if some high-tech features are for show, the tank's core, a 125mm gun derived from a Soviet design, better armor, possibly an auto-loader and anti-tank missiles, it represents a leap forward. And notably, 9 prototypes were paraded in 2020, suggesting North Korea is serious about producing them, not just one show-offable copy. As one defense outlet remarked, quote, "What we are seeing is likely more aspirational than operational, but that can change quicker than most care to admit." End quote. And as for how many of them they have, we have no idea. To keep this simple, let's just call our minimum guess as 9, as that's the greatest amount that we could find pictured together at any given time. Less appreciated by the commentariat, however, because frankly tanks are sexier, is the KN-25, a super large multiple rocket launcher system that blurs the line between traditional rocket artillery and tactical missiles. Featuring 4 massive 600mm launch tubes mounted on a wheeled chassis, the KN-25 is estimated to have a range of up to 380 kilometers and also represents a major departure from North Korea's older Scud-based systems, not only in being more accurate thanks to internal guidance, as opposed to the old dumb Scud-type missiles, but also in its rate of fire. The system is designed to launch multiple projectiles in quick succession, allowing for what the KCNA described as a continuous fire of 4 tactical guided missiles with the power of annihilating a group target of the enemy. Kim Jong-un himself praised the weapons during early test launches, stating it clearly verified the combatability of the weapon system to totally destroy the enemy with a surprise strike, and called it, quoting again, an ultra-precision strike means that it will play a strategic role in actual war. End quote. Military analyst Ankit Panda of the Carnegie Endowment think tank noted that, quote, the KN-25 is essentially a hybrid, a guided artillery rocket that behaves like a missile. Its deployment in numbers could significantly complicate the challenge of defending key military and civilian infrastructure in South Korea. Meanwhile, Joseph Dempsey of the International Institute for Strategic Studies added that by blurring the lines between ballistic missiles and conventional artillery, North Korea has created a system capable of overwhelming missile defense networks with volume and maneuverability. End quote. Interestingly, and unlike the Cheonma-2, there's also basically no suggestions by the Western commentariat that the KN-25 isn't exactly what it is presented as. It's a simple enough logic too, when it comes to North Korea. We're talking about a nation that, despite vast sanctions, manages to have its own independently produced ICBMs and a space program. So, yeah, they do know their way around a missile, and thus we have no reason to suspect that the KN-25 is not legit. The KN-25 isn't alone in the missile capability jump either, as Pyongyang has also unveiled 2 solid-fuel ballistic missiles, the KN-23 and KN-24, both first tested in 2019. The KN-23 bears more than a passing resemblance to Russia's Iskander-M and features a depressed, maneuvering trajectory designed to slip past interceptors. The KN-24 is blockier in appearance and similar to the US Army tactical missile system in function. Both can carry heavy warheads, and both have demonstrated impressive accuracy by ballistic standards, with circular error probable estimates measured in dozens of meters. Both South Korean and US analysts have described these as game changers for North Korea's conventional strike capabilities, allowing for fast, accurate hits on key bases and command nodes in the south. And while we're still on the point of missiles, even North Korea's air defenses have been catching up. In 2021, and again in 2025, Pyongyang tested newly developed surface-to-air missile systems. The 2021 test featured the Ponggai-6, a 2-stage missile system, first showcased during the 75th anniversary parade in 2020. The Ponggai-6 is believed to be influenced by the Russian S-300 and Chinese HQ-9 systems, marking a significant advancement in North Korea's air defense capabilities. And as for the 2025 test, it saw North Korea test the Poloigi-2, a system reportedly inspired by the Russian S-400 and Chinese HQ-22, designed to counter modern threats such as stealth fighters and cruise missiles. State media hailed these as homegrown breakthroughs and reported successful test firings against drone targets, emphasizing their combat readiness, while observers noted the presence of mobile launch vehicles and phased array-star radars in parade footage, leading to speculation about foreign influences in their design. South Korean intelligence also later suggested that Russia had transferred missile technology and parts in return for artillery ammunition and labor, which may explain the sudden leap in sophistication here. Or maybe not, because don't forget the North Koreans do know themselves a good missile. In the skies, North Korea's drone program has also raised eyebrows, as at the July 2023 Victory Day Parade and subsequent arms exhibition, Pyongyang unveiled 2 large unmanned aerial vehicles that bore a striking resemblance to the US RQ-4 Global Hawk and MQ-9 Reaper. These drones, designated Site-Bjol-4 and Site-Bjol-9 respectively, featured long wingspans, camera pods, and even missile pylons. Video footage released by state media showed them taxiing and taking off, suggesting at least some level of functionality. North Korean state media, not unsurprisingly, billed these drones as products of domestic ingenuity and milestones for the Air Force, with Kim Jong-un himself emphasizing the importance of unmanned systems, stating that drones have become an essential requirement for modern militaries and are easy to use as a component of striking power. Western analysts, however, were skeptical. Joseph Dempsey of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, as an example, noted that the Site-Bjol-4, quote, looks like a mirror image of the US RQ-4 Global Hawk, while the Site-Bjol-9 appears to be a carbon copy of the MQ-9 Reaper. Not that that would even matter if they're just straight up copies. They are copies of UAVs with incredible performance records, so we don't think Pyongyang is losing any sleep over accusations of peering over Uncle Sam's shoulder in class. But of course, that statement is predicated on them being full copies, as in inside and out, and many experts speculate that North Korea lacks access to the sophisticated electronics, engines, and optics needed to fully replicate US drone capabilities. Nonetheless, even if these platforms are merely flying shells, they represent an understanding of what modern warfare demands and a proactive will to try and react to it. And that, even by itself, is reason to take them seriously. And all of that is just a small selection of the big stuff that North Korea has been investing in. Things have been just as transformative on the individual soldier level too, as where once KPA infantry marched in mismatched fatigues and maybe, if they were lucky, some of that camouflage, itself often believed to be a leftover of when Beijing was more favorable towards Pyongyang, as well as usually carrying a pattern of rifle first introduced all the way back in 1958, topped by that ancient steel helmet we discussed back at the beginning. Now they are seen wearing new modern camouflage patterns, new combat boots, new plate carriers, new helmets. You get the idea. It just seems that all of it is brand new. Nor would night vision appear to be a rarity. At parades and exercises, North Korean soldiers have been seen with helmet-mounted NVGs and rifles equipped with optical sights, lasers, and even suppressors. These accessories, long common or standard in Western armies, suggest a newfound emphasis on night fighting and tactical flexibility. While it remains unclear how widely this gear has been distributed, and we cannot stress that enough at this point, the mere presence of it marks a dramatic shift from the days of unprotected foot soldiers in khaki drab. Perhaps unsurprisingly, since the new gear started trickling out into public view during Kim Jong-un's early trying but falling short era of modernization, there has been much speculation that much of it is entirely for show, that the NVGs don't work, that the plate carriers are full of any old crap that'll keep them rigid and looking the part. And certainly this is a possibility that we cannot rule out, as we simply have no method of definitively proving it either way as the situation currently stands. But we are reluctant to jump on the, oh, it's all just junk bandwagon. And here's an example why. Someone on our team here at WarFronts, the guy went to the DMZ, the guy who put this piece together, he went just before the COVID lockdown in late 2019. And as he approached the DMZ, the uniforms and gear that he saw at the military tech points got much less dressy and a lot more serious, kind of exactly like what you'd see at those military parades. And certainly, we cannot rule out the possibility that all of this is just for show, for someone's visiting the DMZ. But this gear does fit with speculation about the country more broadly. You can walk around Pyongyang and see shiny new streets full of high-rises emerging from the ground, subways starting to receive new rolling stock, and all manner of fancy modern screens and interfaces at their stations. Cars are now common enough that you actually need to look when crossing the street in Pyongyang. And even the Rugyong Hotel, though still empty internally, lights up at night with a light show more befitting Shanghai. And I know at this point what you might be thinking, so let me preempt it by stressing that we're not transforming this channel into North Korean propaganda fronts, nor are we about to replace every video uploaded so far with 10,000 clips of me praising our glorious new and chubby leader. However, what we are saying is that in the areas where it matters to local leadership, like the military and the elite circles, Kim's reforms might be doing better than most analysts believe. And that means the new military gear could actually be legit. And speaking of the sort of stuff that might be legit, let's circle back to the level of the individual soldier for a moment, because among the sea of shiny helmets and fresh camouflage, there have also been a handful of genuinely interesting new small arms that have slipped into view. One of the most eye-catching, and arguably the most ambitious, is what appears to be North Korea's answer to the OICW concept. Now, for the uninitiated, the OICW stands for Objective Individual Combat Weapon, the idea being a single infantry firearm that combines a conventional assault rifle with a high-tech grenade launcher, ideally one that can fire airburst munitions over cover. It's a concept that US played with in the 1990s with its XM-29 project, which never really panned out. But it did inspire similar efforts abroad, including South Korea's K-11 and China's QTS-11. And now, it seems, North Korea is throwing its hat in the ring. First seen at that 2020 parade in Pyongyang, the North Korean OICW-style weapon, which Pyongyang has never released the name of, features a dual-barrel design with what looks like a modified Type 82-2 assault rifle underneath and a bolt-action top-mounted 20mm grenade launcher fixed above. The entire system is topped with a sizable optic that looks like it could house laser range-finding or thermal targeting capabilities, though whether any of that actually works, again, up for debate, we just don't know. And to be fair, even the South Koreans struggled to make the K-11 reliable. The program suffered numerous failures before eventually being cancelled, so it would be a pretty remarkable feat if Pyongyang managed to field something superior under far greater restrictions. That said, the rifle component does show signs of real thought, including a quad-stack magazine for higher capacity and an integrated foregrip, features that suggest the weapon isn't just cosplay and was at least designed with combat in mind, so again, who really knows? And since we just mentioned magazines, we could hardly not mention North Korea's helical ones, could we? Now for those of you, again, not in the know as what a helical magazine is, just like me reading this, is a type of high-capacity magazine that stores rounds in a spiral or a helix. Well, I could have guessed that, around a central rotating spindle. Unlike traditional box or drum magazines, which stack ammunition vertically or in layers, a helical magazine coils the cartridges in a corkscrew pattern, allowing it to hold a large number of rounds without significantly increasing the weapon's profile. And North Korea has started using them usually on their Type 88-2 assault rifles, the 2 indicating a variant that comes with a top-folding wire stock, handy given the great mass of metal that this magazine lumps around underneath it. Now, we cannot actually stress the great mass detail enough here. We don't actually know how much they weigh for certain, but we can make some educated guesses. For example, a normal round of 5.45 by 39mm usually weighs around 10 or 11 grams. Let's call it 10 grams to make the maths nice and round, and that means that these helical magazines, usually estimated to contain between 100 and 150 rounds, likely add 1 to 1.5 kilos in weight just in ammunition, and that's in addition to the Armament Research Service's estimate to 2 kilos in the magazine itself. Considering that the odd Type 88 has surfaced in the West, although not a 2 variant as far as we're aware, we know that they weigh in the region of 3 kilograms unloaded. Meaning this helical magazine likely leads to its attached rifle to have a weight of around 6.5 kilos, and that puts it dangerously close to, say, FN Mini territory, and that's a light machine gun. There is method to the madness, however, heavy though it may be, and accordingly miserable it may be to have to lug it around with you. If you're in a drawn-out close-quarters battle situation, suddenly you're going to be really grateful for not having to duck and swap a mag after only clearing a room or 3, and similarly, if you find yourself with a need to make that chap over there keep his head down, well, now the whole squad can better contribute to the suppression effort rather than having to rely on, say, a section or platoon-level machine gun for the heavy lifting, and all of that in the package that barely changes the profile of the weapon. However, as you likely guessed from the fact that basically no one else uses them, helical magazines also come with some pretty serious drawbacks. Chief among them, beside their weight, is their mechanical complexity. Unlike simple box magazines, a helical design requires a carefully engineered spiral feed path and internal guide system, which means more moving parts that can jam, wear out, or just fail altogether. They're notoriously tricky to disassemble and clean, and maintenance in the field is far from straightforward. Reloading them can also be a chore, often requiring manual winding or tedious repacking, and making them slower to get back into action compared to standard mags. And yet there they are, clearly in use and proudly being shown off by the North Koreans. So what do we know about their history? Well, they're seemingly a product of Kim Jong-il's time, as they were supposedly first spotted back in 2010 in the hands of his bodyguards, but we are unable to verify that, with our earliest findings of them being here in this still from a 2011 documentary, Succeeding the Great Work of the Military First Revolution. From there, they slowly began getting more common, usually with Kim Jong-un's bodyguards carrying them around more openly, then appearing on ceremonial guards very intentionally put in front of the cameras, and then finally, by 2017, whole units were carrying them during parades. And that pretty much is all we know about them. There's ever more of them, they may be legit, and if they are, they may be a bit of genius, bit of blue sky tactical thinking, or just a heap of barely operable junk made for the benefit of cameras rather than the soldiers. There's more we could say on the matter of the KPA's new gear, much more in fact, but as much as we would like to, we have to draw the line somewhere, lest the runtime of this episode, which is already really long, just gets completely out of hand. So you get the idea. Across the board, there is loads that has been rolled out, and while ultimately the only given we have about availability is the amount that can be seen total in a single frame, and the only assurances for quality being small details that can be gleaned from released materials, we hope you see where we're coming from with this. That very real evidence is beginning to mount to suggest that the KPA might not be the comedy military that it's been written off as for so long, but rather it could be a serious fighting force. Evidence for the KPA potentially just not being it continues to stack up when we change our lens and start looking at new capabilities, a great example of which would be their ballistic missile submarine. And yes, you heard that right, they have a ballistic missile submarine, the kind that keeps its head down under the waves and launches city-leveling missiles. It all began in 2023 when North Korea unveiled what it called its first tactical nuclear attack submarine, the Hero Kim Kung-ok, or submarine number 841, or submarine number 1. The KCNA really is not consistent on the naming. Sorry about that. A retrofitted Romeo-class diesel submarine, now sprouting 10 vertical launch tubes, at first glance appears to be nothing more than an old Soviet design upgraded with the strategic equivalent of duct tape and raw nerve. In some regards, that's exactly what it is. Since it's still diesel-powered, it doesn't even have the unlimited range that's the norm for ballistic missile submarines. At the end of the day, though, it is still a ballistic missile submarine. It's a bit cobbled together. Yes, absolutely. Could the sub be sunk by a single Japanese P-1 patrol aircraft? Well, yes, probably. But it isn't made for a stand-up fight. It's just meant to deliver 1, or rather 10, nuclear sucker punches so hard that North Korea's enemies will start to consider their actions a bit more carefully. And it's not just subs that are coming in new too, as satellite imagery from 2024 showed construction underway on what looks to be the largest warship North Korea has ever built at the Nampo shipyard, possibly a frigate or destroyer with modern missile silos. Again, early days and Western observers are rightly cautious, but given that Kim Jong-un has stated outright that he has a wish to nuclearize his navy, well, there's no reason to assume this won't become the Hero Kim Kung-ok of the surface. A maybe rough around the edges, but still perfectly serviceable ship for the North Korean Navy that can deliver an atomic-powered punch. Eventually, anyway. When they tried launching it in May 2025, it went keel up and straight into the drink. The damage seems repairable, however, from what information trickles out, so it'll likely be back up and on the waves in a year or 3. And now, let's talk cyber. Because it turns out that North Korea also fields one of the most surprisingly effective cyber operations in the world. This capability is no accident either. Kim Jong-un himself has described cyber warfare as an all-purpose sword that, alongside nukes and missiles, guarantees our military's ruthless striking capability. And that's not just flowery language. North Korean hackers, commonly dubbed the Lazarus Group, have a decade-long track record of high-stakes cyber action. The $81 million Bangladesh bank heist in 2016, the Sony Pictures hack in 2014, and the WannaCry ransomware outbreak in 2017 that infected over 150 countries. While most people focus on the missiles that fly, these are the ones that slither through firewalls and hit command centers, crypto wallets, or government networks before anyone knows they've even arrived. It's asymmetric warfare at its finest, and the KPA has clearly realized that if you can't outspend your rivals, you can out-hack them instead. Western analysts are now taking this very seriously. The US Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, for example, has formally labeled North Korea as a sophisticated and agile cyber threat. That's them grouped in with Russia and China, and that, when it comes to matters like this, is actually a pretty massive compliment. So let's quickly race through the DPRK's new capabilities. First up, AI and automation. So yes, even North Korea has a seat on the AI hype train, with Kim Jong-un himself declaring the technology to be a strategic priority, and his nation's media speaking grandly of intelligent weaponry and digital brains coming to the KPA's arsenal. As for what all of that actually means, it supposedly includes automated target recognition for drones and missiles, facial recognition for surveillance systems, and AI-guided suicide drones like a propeller-driven mini-sub that already is known to pack a big bang and seemingly has nuclear ambitions. Will it get to that stage? No one knows. Is it a terrifying concept? Oh yes. And frankly, North Korea doesn't need bleeding-edge machine learning, just enough to improve artillery accuracy or automate strike planning. Even a dumb AI can ruin someone's day if it's strapped to the right warhead. Next up, spy satellites. After years of trying and failing, Pyongyang finally claimed success in November 2023 with the Malagyong-1, a military reconnaissance satellite they say now lets them track US and South Korean movements in real time. The first two launch attempts in May and August ended with smoking wreckage in the sea, but third time's the charm as they made it up there. Whether it works as touted, that's still an open question. South Korean and US intelligence both cast doubt, but it doesn't really matter. Even a glorified orbital pocket calculator that blinks at the Earth twice a day is enough to help plot launch windows and missile trajectories. And besides, it's like the hero Kim Kanok. Even if it isn't what it's hyped up to be, it's enough to make strategic planners do a second take. And then there's electronic warfare, where North Korea punches way above its weight, and there's no ifs, buts, or maybes about that. In late 2024, for example, jammers positioned near the DMZ successfully disrupted GPS signals across broad swaths of South Korea, grounding civilian aircraft and making ships play blind man's bluff with the coast. This wasn't a one-off. Similar attacks happened in 2016 and before, but the 2024 event showed greater range, power, and precision. This, simply put, was a huge deal because GPS underpins far more than just civilian navigation. Modern militaries are deeply dependent on GPS for nearly everything they do. For example, precision-guided munitions like JDAM bombs, cruise missiles, and GPS-guided artillery shells rely on it for accuracy. Aircraft and drones use it for navigation, targeting, and autonomous flight paths. Ground vehicles, including tanks and convoys, depend on GPS for maneuvering and coordination. Naval vessels need GPS to maintain formations, navigate contested waters, and launch guided missiles, and so on and so forth. You get the picture. When that system gets jammed, spoofed, or shut off entirely, the entire networked war machine begins to falter. That's why a concerted attack on GPS, like what was seen in South Korea, isn't just an annoying bit of chest beating. It was a dry run for potential chaos. And finally, we should consider doctrinal and organizational changes. You see, the KPA hasn't just been buying toys, it's been rethinking how to use them. New tactical missile brigades were stood up to manage the KN-23-24 systems, while new special forces outfits training in new ways have been seen putting all that new kit through some good practice. Even its stagnant Air Force is shifting away from leaning on creaky old Cold War MiGs and beginning to focus on air defense, UAVs, and, well, AWACS-style command aircraft. As for regular jets, that appears to be an area that North Korea is not prioritizing for modernization, with all current evidence pointing to the fact that their stocks of such aircraft likely still consist of 50 to 60-ish MiG-23s, 30 to 40 or so MiG-29s, and a mid-20s quantity of MiG-21s. Exactly as they are believed to have had for many years now. As for our educated speculating on the matter, when North Korea knows that there are F-22s stationed at Kadena Air Base via the US Air Force and F-35s hanging around more broadly as part of the South Korean Air Force, it knows that it isn't winning an aerial war, and realistically, it never could hope to, and so it's used its resources more wisely, maintaining a modest Air Force for peacetime aerial interception duties and occasional aerial sorties during a hypothetical war. Also, given how close Russia and North Korea have been getting of late, we absolutely cannot rule out the possibility that their fighter fleet has, in fact, grown of late, and we just haven't figured it out yet. And so, with all of that said, we're starting to reach the end of the argument, and with it, the video. There's just one more thing that we have to discuss. One more reason not to underestimate the KPA. And that's, of course, North Korea's nuclear arsenal. North Korea's nuclear quest began decades ago in the Cold War during the time of Kim Il-sung. Come the collapse of the Soviet Union, they had a tiny little experimental reactor at Yongbyon to show for it, and that's about it. Certainly no bomb, that's for sure. We also really cannot stress enough just how small that reactor was. It had a capacity of 5 megawatts, and just one reactor at the very typical and unremarkable Chapel Cross nuclear power station in the UK, all of which were built in the 1950s, by the way, had a capacity of 48 megawatts. A more modern reactor still, such as Sizewell B, has a capacity of 1,191 megawatts. So yeah, that 5 megawatts at Yongbyon, pretty damn small.
And while the bomb had always been an ambition for North Korea, now that the nation was in the post-Soviet world, the one where, don't forget, China was increasingly keeping them at arm's length, as was newly independent Russia, as far as Pyongyang was concerned, the ambitions were less of a, it'd be a nice thing for us to get a seat at the big boys table, and it became more of a situation of regime survival, one with nuclear weapons being seen as the ultimate deterrent against the US. Accordingly, North Korea quit the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 2003 and openly sprinted for the weapon. From there, with most analysts believing that they were working almost entirely independently, it took them a mere 3 years to achieve their aims, with them detonating their first fission weapon in an underground test on the 9th of October 2006. It only had a tiny yield of about 0.5 kilotons by most estimates, but that mattered not. The hard bit, making it bang, had been done, and from there, it was all about refinement and scaling. And so it proved to be. Each subsequent test grew stronger to the point that in September 2017, they detonated a fully loaded thermonuclear bomb, i.e. a hydrogen bomb. Estimates of its yield vary massively, anywhere from 50 to 250 kilotons, but most analysts at least agreed that it was the real thing. As Tom Plant of the Royal United Services Institute put it, quote, "The North Koreans do bluff sometimes, but when they make a concrete claim about their nuclear program, more often than not it turns out to be true. I think the balance is in favor of it being a thermonuclear bomb rather than a conventional atom bomb," end quote. If they made it into the big boy thermonuclear club all those years ago, it makes us wonder how their arsenal looks today. And the short version is obviously that it's even bigger. Now don't get us wrong, they aren't exactly up there with the Russians or the Americans, who hold roughly 8,000 warheads between them. In fact, they're almost certainly the smallest nuclear power, with most estimates believing them to have a mere 40 to 50 warheads ready to go. But they're producing a few more each year, and thanks to luck of geography, North Korea is sat on plenty of natural uranium, which obviously is fissile in and of itself and also refinable into precious, high-yield weapon-facilitating plutonium. So, yeah, it's fair to assume that that small stockpile is only going to grow. Don't forget too, they also have the means to deliver them to their enemies. All of their enemies. Consider just the upper end of the nuclear spectrum, ICBMs as a demonstration. Pyongyang now possesses ones that put even the US mainland in range, all of it, with examples being the Hwasong-15, which has an estimated range of approximately 13,000 kilometers, and the Hwasong-17 with an estimated range of over 15,000 kilometers. All such ICBMs, however, pale in comparison to the latest and greatest big boy of the North Korean arsenal, the Hwasong-18. Range-wise, it's believed to match the 17, but unlike its forerunners, it's solid-fueled. And solid fuel is a big deal, as it's built into the missile from assembly and takes years to degrade, meaning that the missile can be kept ready to launch at a moment's notice, thus vastly improving response time. Essentially, thanks to the Hwasong-18, any notion of getting the jump on North Korea is a thing of the past. North Korea's nuclear doctrine has also evolved alongside its capabilities, and not in a direction that will likely bring you any comfort. For years, Pyongyang claimed that it would only use nukes defensively as a last resort, but in 2022, Kim Jong-un declared the country's nuclear status irreversible and enshrined in law new conditions for use. The TLDR is if the regime's survival is in jeopardy, North Korea might strike first. The new law even provided for an automatic nuclear strike if Kim and the leadership are taken out, essentially a doomsday trigger to deter any decapitation attempts. The bottom line then, North Korea's nuclear arsenal is far more advanced and lethal than many outsiders once assumed, and that is a very real threat. So there's been a lot of hyping up of the KPA's capabilities in today's video, so as we draw things to an end, let's just make a few things clear. North Korea is not a global power. It lacks the quantity of both ships and aircraft needed to be able to project force overseas, as you would expect a top-tier military to be able to do. Furthermore, if evidence out of Ukraine is to be believed, their soldiers aren't exactly making the SAS quake with fear at the prospect of squaring off against them. Then there's the unknowns. They might currently be rocking some of the best kit currently fielded anywhere. Alternatively, it could just be all smoke and mirrors. For our money, truth's probably somewhere in between, with them having seen a huge increase in material quality, some of which will legitimately be incredible, but some of which will no doubt fall short or just not be available in a quantity where it's any use. So no, we're not suggesting the KPA is about to steamroll its neighbours or go toe-to-toe with NATO, but we are saying that the days of mocking them as a military joke should probably be over, because we really need to clock what's happening here. This is a military that's learning, adapting, and modernizing, sometimes in unexpected and unorthodox ways. And you've got to admit that that makes them better than you thought, doesn't it? Thanks for watching.